Hello, I'm Beck. Welcome to my channel. Today I'll be drawing a D&D character based on the roll of the dice.
Let's bring out the Tower of Destiny!
So we have a Warforged Vampire, and as the name suggests, Warforged are people who were forged to fight a war. Basically, they're made from wood and metal, but they can feel pain and emotion. So they would have been made by some sort of artificer at some point. And the idea is that whatever war they were made for is over. And so they're living their lives just trying to find a purpose for themselves. They're described as having a blend of organic and inorganic materials. So root-like cords infused with alchemical fluids serve as their muscles, wrapped around a framework of steel, dark wood, or stone. Armored plates form a protective outer shell and reinforced joints. Warforged share a common facial design with a hinged jaw and crystal eyes embedded beneath a reinforced brow ridge. Beyond these common elements of Warforged design, the precise materials and build of a Warforged may vary based on the purpose for which it was designed. So I thought it was very interesting rolling a vampire for this one, because it does open up the possibility of, like, obviously during a war, having a vampire-like soldier would be very beneficial. So the design of this Warforged probably hasn't changed that much since the war, but I wanted to give it a little extra personality and sass now that the war is over. So normally I would go into all the traits that you get if you play a Warforged race, but to save on time, I'm just going to chuck them on the screen right now. There you go. And I'm going to focus on anything more the roleplay side of things, the personality of this character, because that's more what I'm thinking about when I'm drawing. Like, I'm not playing as this character, so I don't really need to know a lot of the traits unless they impact how the character is going to look. Whereas for a Warforged, they have roleplay quirks that I'll put on the screen here. I rolled a 2, so it has you often misread emotional cues, which could be really funny if you're playing as a vampire. So I wanted this vampire, I'm going to call it Tiktak. They are a little bit crazy. I don't know if they were crazy when they were built, like if some wires were not wired in properly, but definitely post-war, they have a little bit more of a zany vibe, where they mistake fear for excitement and assume that the person with them actually wants to be doing what's happening. And it's got that sort of very manic atmosphere. So I wanted to capture that in the pose, which I think I've done pretty well. I always use a reference for my poses, and usually, say if I'm drawing a vampire, I'll go on Pinterest and I'll just type in vampire just to see if there's anything that's sort of a little bit different to what you expect, or the opposite if you want to look at like what they all have in common, so that you get the vibe of like, okay, well, at the very least they need to have fangs to know that you've drawn a vampire, or they need to have like a certain color scheme to indicate that they're a vampire. And so if you can't really see their fangs, it still has that vibe that they're not just a normal person. So you get the very like blues in harsh contrast with reds, and like very dark with very like black and white and red and sometimes purple, but like you probably know what I mean. If you go on Pinterest, you find a lot of reference images, and it is very, very helpful when you're trying to draw something from nothing. So I kind of took a little bit of inspiration looking at Warforged, and then separately looking at vampires, and then separately looking at dynamic poses, because it's rare to find all three that capture what I want to do. And if the image already exists that has all three, then I don't really need to draw it, do I? Because somebody else already has. So there's a little insight into my drawing process. But let's look at this particular type of vampire, because when you're making a class for homebrew, I don't have a class written out that's just for vampire, because there are so many different kinds of vampires that I don't feel like I would be able to capture all of them in one single class, even if you included subclasses. I've never written like a full class. My understanding is that it's a lot more complex than you would expect, but you can always choose an existing class that's already been written. Like in this case, I would probably look at a Blood Hunter, which is one that's like not officially Wizards of the Coast, but it is on D&D Beyond. It's by Critical Role, I believe, for some campaign that they did. Let me know in the comments if you know where it actually came from. And in the Blood Hunter class, you sort of sacrifice a part of yourself in order to get magic. In this case, I think it would be a little bit of a warp where you actually sacrifice somebody else. You're like taking their blood, and that gives you magic, and after a certain amount of time that fades, so you need to keep feeding in order to have any magical abilities. Particularly with this kind of vampire that's more of a monstery Nosferatu style of vampire. Looking at the abilities table, that -4, you couldn't have one of the sexy vampires that we hear so much about these days. It would really have to be your classic scary one that is way more obsessed with blood and feeding than like charming someone into loving you. And like if you were going to play a more sexy style vampire with high charisma, I wouldn't look at Blood Hunter as my base class to try and, you know, pick away and change all the things on that to make it fit. I would probably even look at something more like a bard and see if you can incorporate like your charming personality, or like using the magic that's based in like emotional manipulation, and maybe even make them like an energy vampire where they suck the life spirit from someone. But this one is very much all about the blood, all about drinking blood and sucking all the blood from someone's body until they're dead. So Blood Hunter, that's a great class to look at, because it includes traits like Blood Maledict, which I'll put on the screen. You gain the ability to channel or sometimes sacrifice part of your vital essence to curse and manipulate creatures through Hemocraft magic. Now, in this case, you would require somebody else to sacrifice. And I mean, it's just a little step, but it does actually make the character a little bit harder to play, because it means that you can't do any of these blood curses unless you have a second person to feed upon. You can't just like prepare it ahead of time in a battle. You need someone in the battle to, like, either if they're in your party, sacrifice part of their blood, part of themselves for you to do this curse, or you need to already be engaged in combat so that you can try and grab someone and take some of their blood, which is fun. So much fun. Fun. I think especially because this class, coupled with Warforged, it really just goes hand in hand to me, because I don't feel like a Warforged could really play a legit Blood Hunter unless you tweaked it again to say that, you know, instead of blood or Hemocraft magic, you're doing magic with whatever like stuff the Warforged is made out of, because they're not made from blood. They don't have real organs or blood or any of that. So you would almost need it to be tweaked to be a vampire, so that they're like, well, I don't have my blood to donate, but I'll donate someone else's. That's easy enough. I should have just done Bender. Bender from Futurama had a similar line. If you remember the exact words of the line, comment that below, because I feel like I'm going to butcher it if I just do it by memory. Where was I? Yes. The background of this Warforged vampire, and why would they join up with a party? Well, I think I've already answered the joining up with a party part of it, is that they need living beings with blood in order to give them the magic they need. They need people willing to sacrifice, not die sacrifice, but sacrifice at least some of their blood in order for this Warforged creature to have the Hemocraft magic that they need in order to, like, get through a battle or get through the day, depending on if they're just super addicted to doing magic. And it's a kind of vampire where I don't think it needs blood to live. It just needs it for magic, and it's one of those sort of non-negotiable people who feel like, if I don't have magic, then I might as well be dead. And I think this vampire really misses the war. Whatever war they were in, that was the best time of their life. So they have that kind of vibe as someone who peaked in high school, but also the vibe of almost like the Joker or Harley Quinn, or someone who just doesn't care. They're like, they'll jump into a vat of acid. They have no sense of self-preservation, and so they assume that other people aren't particularly worried about dying either. So they think nothing of being like, oh, could you just cut off your finger and give it to me so I can do some magic? Could you just open a vein? I mean, don't be mean. Don't be cruel and deny me your blood. What's wrong with you? I think it's very much that kind of character. So with this low charisma, it is such a low score. With the low charisma, I think it is still a character that would be very fun to play. Just all the other characters in the game don't like them. And I think it is a scary character, but not good, not scary in the sense of being able to use your charisma score to intimidate people, because I think that it's a case of whatever they're trying to do, almost the opposite will happen. So if you're trying to intimidate someone, then you might actually end up being kind of adorable to them, because you might be like, I'm trying to be scary now. But when you're trying to be nice and just charm them, that's when you're terrifying, because you're so freaking creepy that people just want to run away from you as soon as you start being nice to them. So whatever you're trying to do, it backfires, and that's how that negative charisma would play into this game. It's also very low intelligence, but I think that's really just from the fact that this character was built for war, fought in the war, probably won the war, or didn't. I don't think they really cared about the outcome of the war. I think they were more excited about fighting. And now that the war's over, they'll just do whatever. They don't really have an objective. So, yeah. I mean, you could argue that their objective is to continue collecting and sacrificing people so that they can keep doing magic and keep growing their magic, which is a legitimate thing to want to do. But in terms of why you would join a party, other than to use them for their parts, I definitely think it is a case where this character is going along with the party because the party needs them for some reason, and their payment is essentially their party members will either provide the sacrifice of blood themselves or help this character hunt people for that purpose. You could even be playing a campaign where everyone is a little bit evil, and so they like that the character is like this. Or else it is just one of those parties where you got your super happy-go-lucky people, and you've got your barbarians who's hardcore, and then you've got this creepy guy. This is Tiktak. Tiktak wants to be your friend and play with you. And by play with you, I mean use parts of you for playing so that I can do magic that's fun. That's how I imagine Tiktak's voice, so I hope you enjoyed that. What do you guys think of Tiktak? And if you were playing a Warforged Vampire class, how would you go about deciding how that would work? Let me know in the comments, and yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will catch you next time. Okay, bye!